Hello everybody and welcome to One Piece chapter 1027. This is a chapter that continues to flesh out King and Momonosuke as characters. The cover page continues the lion theme that we got in the previous cover page, with Roger running away from a lion that he's doodled on, a la Jigglypuff. So Roger's being a prankster, and then in the background we have Little Buggy and Shanks, looking very relieved that the lion is no longer trying to eat them. Apparently Roger wrote the word dog on the lion's leg. We start off with some of the minks, and just like we saw in the last chapter that Inuarashi had reverted back from his Sulong form after defeating Jack, Nekomamushi has also reverted back from his Sulong form after defeating Perospero. We see that Carrot is giving him a hug, and she's actually hugging him the exact same way that she hugged Jinbei at the start of Onigashima. It's kind of like if Oda is saying that if you thought that hug was special, that's just the way that Carrot hugs big round characters. Yamato then comments that the feat of splitting the sky was also achieved by Roger and Whitebeard, which we already knew, but apparently that was written in Oden's journal, and the impact of the clash begins to send down some rocks and debris to the live floor. Apparently Yamato's Kagami wasn't enough to protect against Kaido's Thunder Bagua, and so we see that Yamato is in fact wounded. And before I go any further, I do have to say that, according to the wiki, Yamato's Kagami technique could also be a reference to an old Japanese legend where once upon a time a lady had to say goodbye to her husband because her husband had to venture out and she was worried about him, so what she did is that she went to the top of a mountain and prayed for his safe return home. And so she ended up praying so fervently, so strongly, that she ended up turning herself into stone, which is kind of what Yamato's technique does, right? Kind of crystallizes her and offers protection. So yeah, shout out to the wiki, because I did not catch that the first time I read the attack's name. And speaking of previous chapters, this is just a pet peeve of mine, but I thought about it after I uploaded my review for 1026. So I think something that would have worked a lot better in the previous chapter is, so you know how Law and Kid got a line each in the previous chapter? So what I would have done is I would have swapped their dialogues, okay? So instead of having Kid say, "You better win," referring to Luffy, I would have had Kid take Law's line and say, "What's he been doing all this time?" I would have given that line to Kid, and then I would have given Law the "You better win." I think that would have worked a lot better, and it would have kept Kid's character more consistent. Anyway, like I said, we see that Yamato is bleeding, and I'm kind of confused as to what the purpose of that panel is. Like, is this supposed to be like a power scaling thing where Oda makes Luffy look superior to Yamato in the future, and then maybe we see Luffy completely tank a Thunder Bagua later on? Is this going to have a negative repercussion on Yamato's health later on, right? Like, is there going to be a moment where Yamato says, "Momonosuke, I'm getting dizzy because of the Thunder Bagua I took. It's up to you now." And speaking of Yamato's blood, I did the research. It turns out that Yamato has the same blood type as Oden and as Luffy, and also, therefore, Jinbei. Momonosuke thinks back to what I believe were Kinemon's last words to him, you know, how much he valued his life. So he wants to be brave for Kinemon, who is a character that most of us really hope is actually dead. Luffy then tries to hold back Kaido with his legs, and then Yamato tells him, "I know you want to 1v1 him," and Luffy gets that Roger smile on his face and says, "Yes, yes I do, because I'm Luffy and I'm the main character." And so unfortunately I think this means that we're not getting a Momotaro team versus Kaido fight anymore, because Luffy's making a statement that he wants to go at it alone and fight Kaido 1v1. Then again, back in chapter 1010, Luffy kind of did say the same thing. He said, "From here on out, leave Kaido to me. I'll be the one to take care of him," and of course we all know what happened after that. So we don't know for sure, but it's looking very unlikely that there will be another team-up fight against Kaido. And speaking of that, I've also read some comments floating around sort of amending the Momotaro theory, stating that maybe it wasn't supposed to be Marco who represented the pheasant in the story, and that maybe it was supposed to be Hiyori instead. Because if you remember, when we first got introduced to Hiyori as Komurasaki, she kind of had like a peacock theme going on with her kimono there. And so we know that, biologically speaking, peacocks are part of the pheasant family. Also, according to Hiyori's Vivre card, if she were to be an animal, she would be a peafowl. So it's essentially the same thing, because peacocks are male peafowls. And so even though I don't expect Hiyori to fight Kaido directly, I do expect her to play a role in Kaido's downfall at some point in the near future. Especially because I'm pretty sure that she was the mysterious silhouette that ended up curing the scabbards. So I'm pretty sure that she's on Onigashima We also haven't seen Denjiro in a very long time, so maybe the two of them have already reconnected, and so maybe they're in the middle of planning something big for this final portion of the act. Momonosuke is now able to summon some dragon clouds so that he can sustain himself in the air, and Yamato reveals that Onigashima is both figuratively and literally a ticking time bomb. Yamato says that the island is full of ammunition and gunpowder and explosives and weapons, and if there's somebody I trust to tell me what's inside of Onigashima, it's definitely the character that's been running around its halls for 20 years. So it's gonna come in like a nuke and kill everybody if it actually makes impact, which will happen in about 5 minutes. So in a way, I kind of view this as another hostage situation, where Kaido is sort of saying, like, in the slim chance that you just happen to defeat me, if you manage to defeat me, my dragon clouds will disappear and the island will fall crashing down and kill all these people. And so that's kind of why at one point Momonosuke says, oh well, if that's the case, then we have to tell Luffy to stop fighting Kaido. Because if Kaido deactivates his dragon clouds, you know, people are gonna die. And Yamato says, no, we gotta figure this out. You gotta figure out this flame cloud thing. At one point, Momonosuke even headbutts the island to try and push it back. He just rams his head into the rocks. And Yamato tells him, no, that's not gonna work. You gotta figure out the dragon cloud thing. You have to make these clouds stronger than Kaido's. That's how you'll stop this. And so that's when I really started thinking about, like, what is Momonosuke gonna do with this island? Because let's say that hypothetically, he figures out, like, the flame cloud thing, right? So let's say that, you know, he's able to support and lift the island, just like his dad was able to lift and support the samurai. So let's say that Momonosuke has that down, and he's figured out a way of, I guess, overpowering Kaido's clouds. Then what? Is he just gonna start bringing down the island gradually, slowly, and just, you know, put it down on the ground peacefully? Because if that were to happen, I think that that would remove a lot of the sense of urgency from this whole thing. So maybe it's a situation where Momonosuke is just sort of barely able to figure it out right before the island makes contact with the flower capital. Another thing is that we get a bird's eye view of the flower capital in this chapter, and it just looks really crowded, right? There's not a whole lot of empty space there for somebody to put down an island. I mean, there's a little bit of like a sort of like a smooth terrain there near the entrance, but that, I think that could be a little bit small. So maybe Momo ends up moving the island to another section of Wano, one that has a lot more empty space, such as Kuri, right? Because we know that there's a section in Kuri that is essentially a wasteland. Another solution that I thought about is that you can evacuate all of the people on Onigashima, so get them out of there, and then since the island is essentially a bomb, what Momonosuke can do is he can fly the island over to Udon, where the factories are, and then just drop the island on the factories and destroy them all. That being said, in order for Onigashima to be used for demolition purposes, you would essentially need to evacuate everybody from the island. And that includes the Beast Pirates. Because you currently have like Topi Roppo that are KO'd on Onigashima. And then the last solution to this whole thing that I thought about was Luffy's awakening. So let's say that Momonosuke doesn't figure it out on time. And let's say that he just can't produce these clouds that he needs to produce to lift the island. So what Oda can do, and I do see, like, there's a part of me that does see Oda doing this because he just loves Luffy so much, that maybe Luffy awakens his awakening and is actually able to turn either Onigashima into rubber or the ground of the flower capital into rubber. So the thing wouldn't explode because you would have a way of mitigating the impact. And when I say that Luffy turns the island into rubber, I don't just mean the island. I mean every non-living thing on the island. All the items, all the weapons, just have all of that turned to rubber, and that way everybody can just bounce off of the ground. Because we still don't know what makes the Gomu Gomu no Mi special. Like, who got arrested because Shanks took it from him? So what makes Luffy's Devil Fruit special? I'm pretty sure we're going to get the answer to that in this fight with Kaido. So obviously Kaido is no longer at full because there's been a ton of people, a bunch of characters just taking shots at him, ganging up on him, and so that damage that he's taken has begun creeping up on him. As Yamato says, like, could it be that Kaido's power is weakening? It's to be expected because he's taken so much damage. Now, when it comes to Luffy's stamina, I think that there was a translation issue because one of the other translations had Yamato saying that Luffy could barely stand or something like that. Maybe I misread it, I don't know. But the implication in the official translation is that Luffy, he should be close to being fully recovered, and then Kaido is the one who's feeling a little bit drained. We go to the life lore to find that King is rage slashing everyone there indiscriminately, and it just reminded me a lot of Zoro's flashback in Alabasta because he remembers his master Koshido telling him, "Swordplay that harms everything it touches isn't real swordplay. The strongest swordsmen are those who can protect that which they want to protect." Granted, we already knew that King wasn't really a swordsman because he identified himself as such, but the quote still really fit the moment. And Zoro tries to block one of these slashes, but apparently it's so strong that it actually shoots Zoro out of the main hall and into the hallway where Frankie is. And so I got reminded that the reason for why Frankie is still in pretty good shape is because during his fight with Sasaki, Frankie was mainly inside of the Frankie Shogun. So Frankie offers Zoro his help, and I was like, oh cool, so are we finally going to get to see some of the weapons that Frankie said that he was going to build to take down Kaido with? But no, Zoro refuses Frankie's help, and so he just ends up leaving shortly after that. So him and Jinbei are probably going to be very helpful after all these fights are done. Also, the way that Zoro refuses Frankie's help and tells him that he wants to proceed to 1v1 his opponent, I thought mirrored his captain's words to Yamato at the beginning of the chapter. We see that Queen has gone back to his full Zoan form for whatever reason. I don't know why he just doesn't stay in hybrid. Maybe it's because he wanted to use his long neck to be able to yell at King for almost cutting his butt. And apparently Sanji put on the raid suit already because he disappeared in this chapter. Not really, that was a joke. It turns out that the reason for why King was so upset in the first place is because Zoro managed to crack his mask. So it turns out that King kind of has like a Katakuri thing going on where nobody has seen his face. King is currently in hybrid form and he just looks beastly. I mean, this is a very intimidating hybrid form. And because of that, because it's so intimidating, and because this is One Piece, I'm already kind of half expecting King's face to be a joke or to have some kind of a gag associated with it. And we do see that one of the spikes has been cut by Zoro. So King shoots himself at Zoro like some kind of a stealth jet. Zoro sees it coming and prepares a Santoryu Ultoragari, which we've seen him use before in Punk Hazard when he was fighting against the dragon. The anime kind of made it seem as if there was like a King's Haki aura being released, intimidating the dragon. He also used the same move against Fujitora in Stampede, which really didn't do much of anything, but it looked cool. And the movie's non-canon anyway. And so I'm thinking that what happens here is that since King's mask has already been cracked by Zoro, this temporary clash in the air is enough to peel off or to break off the already cracked portion of King's mask. That stated, King is actually the one who wins this exchange because his attack is so strong that it manages to blast Zoro right through the wall of the skull and make him bleed out of the mouth. So King's intention is to kill Zoro by making him fall out of the island. And Zoro was about to, except Zoro actually gets a grip on the situation, grabs two swords to aim Itoryu behind him, and debuts his flying tanuki technique to propel himself back onto the island safely. And speaking of tanuki, since the fight is now outside and we're also headed directly towards the flower capital, and we know that Hitetsu is at the flower capital, and given that King says that what Zoro did is unforgivable, I think that King and Zoro are going to end up at the flower capital at some point during their fight, and then King will shatter one of Zoro's swords, and by one of them I mean the Sandai Kitetsu will break. Tenguyama Hitetsu will see this and will offer Zoro the Nidai Kitetsu as a replacement for the lost Sandai Kitetsu, and he will also reveal the secret of creating a black blade to Zoro, so that Zoro can actually turn Enma into a black blade and finish his fight with King that way. Now, the name of the attack that King uses on Zoro in this chapter, it appears to have several meanings, but like the common denominator between the translations seems to be that it's related to like a bow and arrow or an archer. It also has the word red in it, so it could be like, you know, divine red archer or like imperial red bow, something along those lines. So the divine and imperial part of the name would relate to Nika, and then the red part of it would relate to King's race living on top of the red line, and then also them being able to produce fire. Now, if we look at King's face, or at least the part of King's face that ends up being exposed by the end of this chapter, because of the hairline and because of the skin tone, my mind automatically went to these two guys right here. I'm assuming that he's blonde, but that could actually turn out to be factually incorrect. Because I remember when we first got introduced to the Vinsmokes, right? Like, they all have white hair in the manga, and so we just automatically assumed that because they were Sanji's siblings, that all of them were blonde, and it turns out that they had a bunch of different hair colors. Now, if King's appearance, if King's face is actually going to end up having a comedic element to it, or a gag associated with it, like in Katakuri's case, right? Then I think it's important to remember that in the very early stages of Wano, Queen does refer to King as a sadistic pervert. And so we still kind of don't know why Queen called him that. And so that part of King's personality still needs to be shown. I mean, we do have a pretty good idea of why King is called sadistic, because, you know, as we see in this chapter, he's like incredibly ruthless. But the pervert part of Queen's comment, that's the part that we're not sure of. So that has to come into play at some point. Now, if I'm interpreting it correctly, we do get to see two panels in which we see that King has like some kind of a tattoo on his eyebrow. And so when I think about tattoos in the world of One Piece, I automatically think about Skypians, right? Or Shandians in this case. I think about characters like Kalgara and Wiper, who also happen to have tattoos around their eyes. Katakuri had like a wing tattoo on his back, so maybe that's related to that as well. And then of course Dragon as well, whose tattoos we still don't know the significance of. I've also seen some comparisons of Dragon's tattoos with tattoos that were worn a very long time ago by a tribe of Native Americans. So like we're going back in time, like we're going back to ancient times, you know, the first people of this One Piece world. The word Shandora, which is where the Shandians were from, means moon in Sanskrit, right? And so if that means moon, and then King is a Lunarian, Luna means moon as well, and if Luffy is a descendant of sun god Nika, right? And if Luffy is Dragon's son, does that mean that Luffy is also connected to these people of the moon? Because we do see that Nika can produce fire from his hair, sort of like King. So is Nika also a Lunarian? Also, something else that I noticed in this chapter is that in the panels where we see King in hybrid form, he actually does not have fire on his back, which is kind of strange because he has fire when he's in his human form, and he also has fire on his back when he's in the Pteranodon form, in his full Zoan form. So unless it's a mistake, I'm a little bit confused as to why, you know, King's hybrid form seems to negate like the fire on his back. And then also, we still haven't seen King use some of his fire attacks on Zoro. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Finally, I do want to comment on Zoro's last words to King in the chapter when he tells him, at least let me die by the sword, show some respect, right? This is very dishonorable. What you were trying to do, just push me off this island. So King, we see that he just doesn't care. Like, he's breaking all of the swordsman rules. He's going against the swordsman code, right? He's just like, whatever, dude. Like, I'm going to kill you the way I want to. It doesn't matter to me. And so what we have here is a character that is morally opposite to Zoro. So King is everything that a swordsman shouldn't be. Which reminds me of a similar conflict established in Oda's one-shot called Monsters, which features Ryuma. And speaking of Ryuma, something that I just recently noticed is how the patterns on his clothing are also similar to the pattern of Dragon's tattoos. In fact, the kanji on Ryuma's sleeves actually says Ryu, which means dragon in Japanese. So it's probably a reference to the dragon that he slayed. And then of course we know that the devil fruit users that turn into dinosaurs, their devil fruits are all under the Ryu no Mi umbrella, or the dragon fruits. So which dragon will Zoro slay above the capital? Will it be King or will it be Kaido? Or will it be both? Honestly, I'm open to both possibilities. I think you can honestly make an argument for both. I will say though that the golden rule of One Piece is that Oda will never make another character look better than Luffy. Like, Oda's favoritism towards Luffy is just way too high. So if Zoro is actually going to kill Kaido, then by definition, Luffy has to end up doing something even cooler. That's just the way that Oda writes One Piece. When it comes to the crew, it's just super clear that Luffy will never be in anyone's shadow. So if you can find a solution to that, I'm all ears. And then the last thing is the whole thing about Zoro telling King, at least let me die with a sword, which kind of reminded me of like a scene in Ringo where Kawamatsu tells Hiyori that the children of Ringo, when they are born, they are given a sword, and they essentially grow up with that sword. The sword is their companion for life, and then when the person passes away, their sword is used as a grave marker. So yeah, I just thought that Zoro's comment to King about the way of the sword and death was sort of a connection to Ringo and his possible Shimotsuki heritage. And also, like, if Zoro was born in Ringo, I wonder what sword was given to him as a child. Was it maybe the Nidai Kitetsu? Like, is that like supposed to be Zoro's inheritance, maybe? That is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Overall, I thought this chapter was solid. Thank you for all of your support. Let me know your thoughts about the points that I raised in the video down in the comment section. Take care, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.